where the best fits for all of these draft picks and which teams will do a total 180 in 2023. We'll tell you right here on Locked On NFL.
You are Locked On NFL, your daily NFL podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On NFL on a Wednesday. I am Tony Wiggins along with my partner in crime, James Rapien. And what we're going to do today is give you a great show as usual. But we thank you for making us your first listen, reminding you to also tap in on YouTube, and you can subscribe for free on YouTube. And then make sure you listen in wherever you get your audio podcast to ensure that you hear Locked On NFL every single day, because it's your team every day right here. What's going on, James?
What's going on, Tone? How you doing, man?
I'm doing all right, man. I can't complain much. Got a good show today. We're going to talk first and foremost some draft prospects and where they fit perfectly. I got a couple of them. I got a couple of favorites. I got two guys that I think are going to come right into the NFL and contribute right away. And then in segment 2 or 3, we're going to look at playoff teams that might not make it back to the playoffs and have a bad season. And then we'll look at teams that did make it to the playoffs that we consider poor teams that are probably picking very high in the draft that we think have the best chance to make the playoffs. First and foremost, with these prospects, I will say this, and one of the reasons I feel this way is because the team that I cover finally is out of the top 10, and we're in the back end, the back quarter, if you will, of the NFL draft. So I've been looking at guys that they could pick and they could sit there without pressure and taking the best long-term prospect, like the whole Trayvon Walker versus Aiden Hutchinson thing, where you take the guy who's going to do good now, or you take the guy who's going to be better in 3 years. Sometimes you just sit and just let a player fall to you. And so I have a couple of players that I'll talk about that may fall to teams, and they'll be able to help them right away.
Yeah, and we can dive into some of those, but let's start with the top prospect, the guy that everyone looks at. And he might not be the first player off the board, but I think he's got a good shot, and that's Bryce Young. Mm-hmm. Where's his best fit? And there's a lot of talk about his size and all of those things. And I look at the top of this draft. To me, it's pretty obvious. Now, Carolina obviously traded up to number 1. You have Houston 2, Arizona 3. They don't need a quarterback. They could trade down. Colts, Seahawks. That's the top 5. He's not getting out of the top 5. He's probably not getting out of the top 2. Carolina is the best fit. You have what a take, right? But you have it clearly an owner that wants to win, that has aggressively went and got a head coach in Frank Reich that, to me, shouldn't have been fired by Indy. And we'll see how he proves himself, but certainly knows quarterbacks. And you got Josh McCown there, and you have guys that know the quarterback position.
Right.
And so if you go there, and this goes for any of the quarterbacks, honestly, could say it for CJ Stroud or any of them. Good defense, not a great division by any stretch, arguably the worst division from a quarterback standpoint in the NFL as of today. Solid weapons, not great, but solid. You lose DJ Moore. But overall, I think it's a perfect landing spot for a quarterback, and he would be set up to have some early success. Now, are they playoff bound? I don't know about that. But could they go 8-9? Could they go 9-8? Could they be in the mix in that NFC South? I certainly think so. So to me, yeah, DJ Chark, a guy you're familiar with. I like that addition. Bryce Young goes there. They could be pretty solid in Carolina this season.
They can be. They've done a lot of things, and they have some really, really good players. Derek Brown at defensive tackle, along with Brian Burns at the end spot. So they already have 2 of their critical positions fixed. They got some pretty decent players on that offensive line, and then they got a real good corner in J.C. Horn too. So my thing is, the sky might be the limit for them with a new bit of a fresh start. I think Bryce and Stroud, by the way, more so than the other 2 guys, the thing that they're debating is who has the best upside, right? But the thing about Stroud and Bryce is, I think right away, in terms of being able to come out, play with confidence, play with leadership, place the ball where it's supposed to be placed on a consistent basis, I think those two have that licked right away. And so it depends on whether or not you actually think, because of Richardson's athleticism and because of the way Levis is all yoked up, that they're a little bit different. I like Hendon Hooker better than a lot of people too. You know, if you're looking at the draft from the way baseball teams look at the draft, where we're building for our future and prospects and not necessarily thinking about immediate production. I agree with you. I think it'd be for a team that's looking for stability and a team that's looking for a guy who can just function on a daily basis and someone who looks and acts like a leader. I just think you hit it dead on the head when it comes to those two. And I actually think with Bryce Young and Stroud, there is no bad fit for them anywhere.
Yeah, I think for the most part, you're right, because they're plug and play. You know, they could start, I think, day one in Houston or day one in Carolina. And I think both of those teams are the ones that take quarterbacks ultimately. Let me give you one bad fit real quick. Anthony Richardson, if he has to go to the Colts, and there's been so much smoke there, and he's visiting the Raiders, that would be another bad fit to me. And the reason, well, the Raiders actually wouldn't. I take it back. I forgot about Jimmy G for a half second. But the Colts, there's a lot of pressure to play day one. And I don't think the conference is or the division's great. So you could make that argument, but you don't have great weapons. You have okay weapons, not great weapons, really good running back, a so-so defense, and no veteran quarterback to learn from. The Raiders, they have Jimmy G. You look, the Seahawks, they have Geno Smith. Those would be two ideal landing spots, right? The Titans, let's say they move up. That would make sense. They have Ryan Tannehill. All of those situations make sense to me. You know Richardson better than anyone, or most people at least in this network. Just watching him, I would imagine, down there. I know it's Gator country you're living in. What do you think about him and him sitting for a year? Because I think that makes a ton of sense. So he can sit, learn, and then use those athletic talents in 2024.
I think that makes all the sense in the world. I know him. I watched him. I rooted against him when I watched him because obviously I am a Seminole supporter. But the guy that's been training him since he's been a pup is Denny Thompson. We've had Denny Thompson here on our show. He's a good friend of mine. Denny and I have done radio. We've known each other for probably 12 years, 10, 12 years. And Denny loves the kid. I tell you what, Brian Johnson, the new Eagles offensive coordinator, from what I heard at the combine, said that was the best quarterback he's ever dealt with. And asked him again, I was like, including the one you got now in Philly, he said, like I said, he's the best quarterback I've ever dealt with. So there's nothing athletically from a competitive standpoint that you don't like about Anthony Richardson. I don't think he runs enough. In fact, I think he really tried to prove that he was a pocket passer. Let me get a couple of mine real quick. Guys that could slip, that could step in day one and play. JSN, Jackson Smith, and Jiba. I think he's a top 10 player. I saw a video yesterday where Brian Hartline was asked to name the best receivers he's had since he's been there. He says Marvin Harrison's number one and JSN is number two, and that includes the two guys that went in the first round last year. That is not foreign to me. A buddy of mine was a player personnel director in the Big Ten. Now he's in the SEC. He told me 2 years ago when he was at Indiana, he said they got blown out, by the way, by Ohio State. And he told me, he said the three receivers that came off the bench were better than those three that started. And I was like, are you serious? He said, yeah. So the dude that actually told me that is a former NFL scout. And by him telling me that, I heard this 2 years ago, at least a year and a half ago, that was the case. So Jackson Smith and Jiba is one. He has a visit with Jacksonville.
I agree. He's a top 10 guy, by the way.
Yep. I think he's just a football player. He understands it. And Bijan Robinson. And I know there are some people that aren't high on him, but you cannot be high on him because of positional value. You cannot be high on him because you just don't see it. I've seen somebody somebody that we both know said, I just didn't see it. Well, the thing is sometimes when you don't see it, it's because the guy makes it look so easy.
Mm-hmm. Well, he's third on Daniel Jeremiah's big board, third. And you cover the Jags, I cover the Bengals. I've made it very clear. All right, NFL, let him fall to 28.
Mm-hmm.
And Bengals, you better take him if he's there. I don't think he will be, but you better take him if he's there. Positional value be damned. So I think he's a stud. I agree with you.
So perfect choices for me is JSN going to Green Bay.
Ooh,
at 15
Jordan Love.
With Jordan Love and the kid they took last year, the Watson. That'd be a perfect dynamic. And Bijan Robinson, if he somehow ends up with the Buffalo Bills. And I know you said 28, but Buffalo.
They're at 27. They're at 27.
So you want a bell cow to sort of a guy that you can trust to sort of you want to eventually stop Josh Allen for being your best runner, right? Mm-hmm. It's the perfect situation to also loosen things up on the back end to allow Stephon Diggs and those guys to eat. So that's what I think we're going to get into here in segment 2. You want to do bad going to good or good going to bad first? Which one do you want? Whatever way you want, that's what we're going to do.
Bad going to good. We will do that next. But today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel is America's #1 sports book, and the NBA playoffs are almost here, which means it's time to get your no sweat first bet. Up to $1,000 in bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. You just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores and threes drained. Maybe you think LeBron James and the Lakers are going to get that 5 seed. You can wager on them and so much more with the same game parlay as well, where you can get a chance at an even bigger payout. So don't miss the chance to get your no sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA.
Running it down here on Locked On NFL on a Wednesday. James Rapien and Tony Wiggins, thank you for making us your first listen here on Locked On NFL. All right, we're talking bad to good, and then the next segment, good to bad. Teams that were bad last year, I consider any team that didn't make the playoffs, ever since the playoffs has expanded, any team that didn't make the playoffs was a bad team. It was a bad season, right?
Sure.
If there's a team, I believe, that can make a jump from a non-playoff team and a non-factor, and really they're picking in the top 10 of the draft this year, but based on what they've done in free agency, how they played last year, who their coach is, and what else is around them in the division, I'm going to say the Atlanta Falcons have a chance, in my opinion. You just talked about Carolina. I'm going with my man, Aaron Freeman, Locked On Falcons, all of that. I think the Atlanta Falcons, because of the additions that they have, some of the players that they have, the division that they play in, and whatever they decide to do at number 8, even if it's not move up and get a quarterback, I think Desmond Ridder will be better in his second year. I like all of their tall, rangy receivers, their commitment to their offensive line to be able to run the ball. That's the first thing they did in free agency. And then they've also addressed their defense, and they're going to have a chance to do that some more. It is the Falcons for me, regardless of what they do. I think they've done a real good job the last couple of years building their team, and I think Atlanta has a chance to really do some special things.
Interesting. Not the Saints. You're not in on the Saints right now.
No, not yet.
Wow. All right. So some Derek Carr slander there. Okay. All right. I see you. I think it's interesting for sure. You said not to make the playoffs. I think Detroit is low-hanging fruit. I just want to mention them because I could totally see them winning that division. That's not who I'm going to pick. I do think the NFC South is pretty much up for grabs and could totally see Atlanta making a run. By the way, I'm a Bearcat, so I wouldn't be mad if Desmond Ridder played pretty well this year.
Right.
But to me, the team that is obviously making the push to make the playoffs, and I'm going to go AFC here, it's the team that hasn't made the biggest move over the offseason yet. It's the New York Jets. The New York Jets. They won 7 games last year. They were a good team. They lost Breece Hall. They were able to overcome that. They're going to have a quarterback that can throw the ball to Garrett Wilson. They've added some important pieces, I would say, and I think they're going to add Odell Beckham Jr. If you're Odell, you going to Baltimore? where things look weird at quarterback and it's just a weird dynamic, why would you do that when you could go back to New York and play with Aaron Rodgers? Makes all the sense in the world to me. So weapons, check. Defense, I love Sauce Gardner. Quinnen Williams, they have pieces on defense. We could go on and on about that defense. I think they're poised to win double-digit games. They might not win that division. It's a real good division, but I think they can win double-digit games and make the playoffs.
When you said AFC, I thought you were going to have the audacity to go right down the road from you and say Cleveland. I think Cleveland has more guys who are, if you start going position by position in the NFL, Cleveland probably is the team that didn't make the playoffs that might have more guys in the top 7 of all the positions in the league. Myles Garrett is probably number 1 or number 2 in terms of edge, depending on who you talk to. It's either him, Bosa, or Watt. Denzel Ward is top 5 corner, depending on who you talk to. Nick Chubb is definitely a top 5 running back, and when he's not in trouble, Deshaun Watson is definitely a top 7, top 8 quarterback. That's a lot of star power for a team that didn't win anything. And that's why I don't understand how they're going to not go after Odell Beckham and keep him out of. He'd be perfect opposite.
Back to Cleveland?
Amari Cooper. Yeah, he'd be perfect. It's a new situation. New situation. He was right. He was right. It was all people thought Jalen was coming back to Jacksonville. He was right. It wasn't. It was Baker Mayfield.
Oh my goodness.
It was Baker.
That's a take. You think Cleveland's the best fit for Odell? You wait until 16 minutes in this show to say that? Are you serious?
Listen to me, man. People thought he was going back to the Giants when they got rid of, and
that was stupid too. Why the hell would you go to the Giants?
But they changed everything around. So I think sometimes when teams have to, you have to not be egotistical, and you have to realize, hey, man, say what you want to say. Jalen Ramsey was right about Jacksonville. They were losers. And they were doing everything from a front office standpoint, coaching. Everybody.
Is he back in Jacksonville?
No, he's in Miami. They didn't go back and do it, but we gotta. I wouldn't mind. I wouldn't mind it if he came back. And I mean, if he was right, like was he or was he not right about Baker Mayfield? Yes.
Who's better with Odell, the Jets or the Browns?
The Jets, because of Aaron Rodgers.
You trust Aaron more than Deshaun? That's a tough one.
Yeah, I do.
Just this year?
Yeah.
Obviously this year because of age and stuff. Yeah, that's interesting. I sure as hell know it isn't Baltimore, but Jets and
I wouldn't go to Baltimore if you're trying to win right now. The quarterback ain't the quarterback, and he's tweeting and all. I ain't got time for people like that to be leading. And folks don't understand. I tweet a lot, right? But I'm talking about your quarterback is your leader. He should not be tweeting through his contract negotiations. It makes no sense to me.
Yeah, to me, the best fit, if you really look at it, and I don't know if they have the money to do it, but for Odell would be Kansas City because they need the receiver, right? And it would be a need for them. We'll see if they get it done. We'll see what happens. But one more, worst to first, and this one's a little sneakier. And I don't know if it first is subject, but could they make a playoff push? What if the Bears get Jackson Smith and Jigba at 9? And suddenly you have Jackson Smith and Jigba. You have DJ Moore. You have DJ Mooney. Or Darnell Mooney, excuse me.
Chase Claypool.
There's a reason I left him out.
Yeah,
what do you think about what do you think about that? I think he's the all get off the bus team is Chase Claypool.
But. Yeah, well, it would definitely eliminate any excuses or any questions about whether or not they have enough to help their quarterback be very good. And I think it would. I think it would definitely make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Great players. There's a theme here. Great players make sense anywhere.
Yeah,
right?
I can make the argument for Odell in Jacksonville and Cincinnati and anywhere you want to talk about. You could. You absolutely could. Up next. All right, we did worst to first. Who's going to drop from first to worst? We'll dive into that next year on Locked On NFL.
Running through it here on a Wednesday edition of Locked On NFL. Make sure you check out, after making us your first listen, make sure you make your second listen, Locked On NFL Scouting with Draft Dudes. Joe Marino and Kyle Krabs, because you will get comprehensive draft and scouting coverage that you just can't get anywhere else. The Draft Dudes are part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Make sure you make it your second listen, and it is available wherever you get your podcasts. All right. So I put Atlanta in the playoffs after not making it last year. I got 2, so I'm gonna let you go first, because if you get one, I'm just gonna choose the other one. So who has a chance to go from making the playoffs to not even being a participant or not having a sniff or just having a poor year this year?
Tampa is the most obvious one.
Okay.
I don't even want to count that one because it's the most obvious. I mean, you go from Brady to Mayfield. I mean, that's enough said, right? I don't have to go much farther than that. And they were obviously flawed last year. I think Seattle has a chance to take a step back, and I know they weren't first in that division, but they have a chance to take a step back. Won some close games. They were like the feel-good story of the year.
Yeah,
I could totally see that being a team that takes a step back. But if we're going division winners, are we sure the Eagles are going to make another run? And they lost a lot on that defense. They lost both coordinators. Like, that's a lot. It's a lot to overcome. I still think there's a lot of talent. I buy into Jalen Hurts, buy into A.J. Brown. It's not that. Love Devontae Smith. It's really not that. It's just, are we sure? And so we'll see. They lost Hargrave as well. Like, they lost a lot of stuff. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, who no one seemed to really want. He signed that one-year deal with Detroit. So I think that's a division winner that stands out to me. And when you win 14 games, it's tough to fall down that far, but I think they could fall to borderline playoffs or certainly not first in that division.
I'll disagree with you on that one. And it's because I think Jalen Hurts is that guy. I really like the guy.
He is that guy.
Yeah, I like their coach. I really like the fact that they elevated Brian Johnson, who was the quarterback's coach, and now he is the offensive coordinator. And then they still have a pass rush, right? And they still have an offensive line to go with those great receivers. That's enough continuity for me, especially in the trenches, where bringing back Fletcher Cox was huge. And then they have 2 picks. They have a 10th pick to be a Super Bowl participant and have a top 10 pick on top of it. I just think they have too much working for them, especially in that division. When you look around, Washington doesn't have a quarterback. Dallas is trying to figure it out and figure, who's going to be calling plays and how the offense is going to work. The Giants were a one-hit wonder, and Daniel Jones is still their quarterback, and I know he played really, really well. I just think Philly has the best chance to go back and run it back.
They did keep Slay too to the they were about to lose him to Baltimore
and Bradbury. They kept both of their but I can understand why you say that, because every single year somebody who was super one year, every time we turn up and we look up, all it takes is 1 or 2 bad injuries or situations or a close game here or a close game there, and then bang, you're right. Guys get paid and get a little lazy and think they've arrived. So yeah, just think back. They won the Super Bowl, and then the 2 years following that, they went 9-7. And Doug Peterson got fired after the 3rd year. So there's a chance that they could fall back. My team, Tampa was one of my 2, by the way.
I figured when you mentioned the South.
Yeah. There's a team that is talented, but I don't think they made the proper moves in the offseason. And they were up 27-0 in the playoffs against Jacksonville and got walked down. It's the Chargers. The Chargers every single year. And now Austin Eckler doesn't want to be there anymore. Every single year you look on paper and they're supposed to be so good, and Justin Herbert's supposed to be all of this. And every year they're either at home or they're eliminated early. And for some reason we hold Justin Herbert to a different standard than we do Lamar Jackson and everybody else, because all everybody else says about a quarterback who wants to get paid is he can't win. Okay, so what's Justin Herbert's fault? I'll tell you what might be his biggest detriment is Brendan Staley. I think instead of firing the offensive coordinator, don't fire the guy that got you up 27-0. Fire the guy who couldn't hold a lead, couldn't hold. Jacksonville had to stop and score every single time in the second half, and that's exactly what they did. I think Brendan Staley is the one that they should have gotten rid of, and they didn't. They put a Band-Aid on a broken leg, and I just think they're going to be a year behind and a year late, but he should have been gone, and they should have gave that job to somebody else. But I think it's the Chargers, man. I think they are the most overachieving team I've seen over the last 20 years. They're probably the most. When you think about all the guys that came through there that could have been Hall of Famers. I just can't for the life understand me what it is about them that can't get them over the hump. But every single year, the Chargers are going to Charger, and I got that from the guys at Locked On Chargers when they say the Chargers are going to Chargers. So, yep, that's my team, the Chargers. I think they fall off.
I get it. And there was so much hype last year about the AFC West. I think the Broncos are better. I don't know how much better they will be record-wise, but I think they're better. I think the Raiders are better.
And the Chiefs
you're not going to have the friction between quarterback and coach that you had last year with the Raiders. And Jimmy G is a capable quarterback. He's close to Derek Carr. You might think that Carr is better. I think it's close. And you're right. The Chiefs, well, those boys are something. And a year ago, some were thinking, they're not going to win that division. They're still the top dogs. So, yeah, I think you got something there with the Chargers. We'll see. A year older. And Eckler is really their best weapon. And the other part of this, Keenan Allen isn't getting any younger.
No, Mike Williams can't stay healthy.
It's tough. It's tough, man. You're going to have to get some weapons there, especially if Eckler wants out. So
Khalil Mack
I can totally see.
Right.
Anyway, that's going to see. We ended on a negative note there. I was trying to balance that good to bad, bad to good. And yeah. Oh, sorry, Chargers. Chargers going to Charger. He's Tony Wiggins. I'm James Rapien. Thank you so much for listening to a Wednesday edition of Locked On NFL.